Hey guys, it's time to start talking about biogeochemical cycles. So we're going to start by talking about the carbon cycle, which is probably the most familiar, along with the hydrologic cycle of the biogeochemical cycles. So first, let's talk about what that means. So biogeochemical cycles are those cycles that move elements and compounds through the ecosystems and the atmosphere or the biosphere in cycles. So there are lots of different processes. There are inputs, there are outputs, and mostly there are transformations of these elements from one form to another. So let's talk about a quick overview of them. There are biogeochemical cycles that involve water, nitrogen, carbon, phosphorus, and sulfur. So the carbon cycle. Carbon is the element of life. It is the foundation of an entire branch of chemistry called organic chemistry. It is the foundation of life. Without it, we do not have life as we know it. So let's talk about this carbon cycle. So like all of our biogeochemical cycles, we're going to learn some processes that move it from one area to another. So these should be pretty familiar to you: cellular respiration and photosynthesis. So photosynthesis is the process by which photosynthesizers, usually plants, but sometimes algae, cyanobacteria, phytoplankton, remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, combine it with water, and form glucose. That glucose is the fuel for those plants. The plants themselves become fuel for primary consumers on up through secondary and tertiary consumers. All of those organisms, the photosynthesizers and the consumers, go through a process called cellular respiration. And cellular respiration is essentially the reverse of photosynthesis. So it takes the glucose and breaks it down into carbon dioxide and water. Generally speaking, more carbon dioxide is taken in by photosynthesis than is released by cellular respiration. So this is a net removal of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, but depending on what happens to those photosynthesizers and consumers, it does eventually get released back into the atmosphere. There's another process that processes carbon, and that is decomposition. So those producers and consumers, when they die, go through decomposition by detritivores and by decomposers, which then also releases carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So those are the three natural parts of the cycle: photosynthesis, cellular respiration, and decomposition. There's also burning, and again, this can be a natural process, things like wildfires, or it can be a human-influenced process. So things like humans burning biomass, wood, or fossil fuels. And that process of burning carbon-containing compounds adds carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. Okay. So in the abiotic environment, so in the non-living environment, there's lots of carbon. We have carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. We have carbon dioxide dissolved in water. When carbon dioxide dissolves in water, it tends to form carbonic acid, which then weakly dissociates into hydrogen carbonate and hydrogen ions. So when we dissolve carbon dioxide into water, it actually lowers the pH of water. We have calcium carbonate rocks. Those rocks are considered abiotic, even though they generally come from ultimately many hundreds of thousands of years ago from living things like coral. But in the form of rocks, we consider them part of the abiotic part of the environment. And then, of course, our deposits of coal, petroleum, and natural gas, and those come from fossilized organisms. And we have our dead organic matter, so that's our humus. That's after the decomposers have broken it down. All right, carbon enters the biotic world through those processes we talked about. Photosynthesis. This is where plants or algae or cyanobacteria take carbon dioxide and water, and using energy from the sun, form glucose, which then becomes the fuel for the plants and the consumers. There is also a chemosynthetic food chain that relies on sulfur for the energy instead of sun for the energy. This generally happens only deep, deep, deep on the ocean floor, so in that benthic zone. And this allows chemosynthetic bacteria or archaebacteria to process carbon dioxide into glucose using the sulfide chain as energy. This is a very, very small portion of the carbon cycle. Okay, it gets back into the atmosphere and water through cellular respiration. That's the opposite of photosynthesis. And then through burning and decomposition. If there's oxygen present, decomposition produces carbon dioxide. If there is not oxygen present, so if this is an anaerobic environment, it actually produces methane instead of carbon dioxide. But methane is a gas which can also enter the atmosphere. Right now, our uptake and return of carbon dioxide are not in balance. So this is a graph of measurements of carbon dioxide concentration in parts per million at the summit of Mauna Loa, Hawaii from 1958 to 2000. You'll notice that there are these fluctuations. It goes up and down every year. Those are seasonal fluctuations. The reason that there are seasonal fluctuations is that in the Northern Hemisphere during our summer, carbon dioxide levels go down because all of the photosynthetic organisms are taking in carbon dioxide and reducing its concentration in the atmosphere. In the winter, when we have fewer photosynthetic organisms working, those carbon dioxide levels go up again. So that's why you see that seasonal variation. But you'll notice that the trend overall is increasing. So why is the trend increasing? We just talked about that. So why is the trend increasing? The trend is increasing because we are adding carbon dioxide to the atmosphere faster than all of those natural processes can take it out. So that's the carbon cycle. Should be pretty familiar to you. If you have questions, let me know.